Well, hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us today for another great webinar from the Esri AEC team. Today, we're going to be talking about the challenges and the benefits of a cloud deployment for GIS. And we've got ROK Technologies and Fishbeck, a customer of ROK, to walk us through very specific examples of how they've implemented GIS, the deployment patterns that they've explored and the specific directions they went down. From here, Jennifer, I'll let you take it away, introduce yourselves, and again, please ask questions along the way here. We're keeping an eye on things. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much, Mark. Welcome. We're very excited to be here. I will quickly introduce myself. I'm simply moderating. My name is Jennifer LaRue. This is really a conversation around the challenges and benefits of a cloud deployment between our two highlighted speakers today. First off, we have Karen Ashby. She is a senior GIS specialist at Fishbeck with over 20 years of experience. She designs, develops, implements, and manages geospatial data, databases, and applications. At Fishbeck, Karen manages ArcGIS Enterprise Portal and ArcGIS online environments, authors data services, publishes web maps and web applications for viewing and GIS editing purposes, and serves as a subject matter expert for GIS data workflows and management of GIS data. That's just a little bit of an overview. And then we have Jason Harris, and he's the CTO of ROK Technologies with over 26 years of experience in web-based GIS, IT, and database administration. Quickly designing solutions and troubleshooting problems effectively with his broad technical experience, Mr. Harris stands out as an enterprise GIS and cloud expert. And he is also the architect of ROK Technologies Managed Services Program. So welcome. I will be speaking just to prompt a few questions to keep the conversation going, but we are very excited for today's conversation. We'll go through Fishbeck at a high level around the GIS team and customer needs just to orient everyone to their situation, go into some challenges faced with the on-premise solution, a turning point for considering the cloud, and how they made a business case to deploy, and what that process looked like. And then again, today, being in the cloud, how has that helped them move their GIS forward, along with ending on some key advice that might help you. So I'll hand it off to Jason and Karen to talk a little bit about the companies.
All right, thank you, Jennifer. I don't know, I didn't really like that intro, the 26-something years experience. It makes me feel a little bit old. I'm young at heart, right? Anyway, but really, just a real quick, this is not an ad-based thing. I just want to tell you a little bit about ROK and kind of, give us a little street cred, just to tell you a little bit about us. It's really our sole focus is to deploy, manage ArcGIS enterprise systems in cloud environments. So we're a Esri Cloud specialty partner. We have a team of certified, AWS and Azure folks who work on our cloud teams. We have teams of Esri enterprise specific folks. We bring, lots of years of extensive knowledge in those two key categories. So it's our goal is to make these very scalable, very durable, cost-effective, environments that are really cloud first. Put these in the cloud to essentially take all that kind of IT and ArcGIS enterprise specific administration off your plate, so you guys get to focus on doing real GIS work. So when you're not saddled down with all that extra stuff, you can actually focus on doing your GIS. A little bit about ROK.
Great. Karen, how about Fishbeck?
Yeah, so a little bit about Fishbeck. We are an employee-owned, multidisciplined engineering firm. Our customers include local governments, schools and colleges, healthcare, environmental, private clients. We were founded in 1965. We have over 500 employees in 14 states, and those offices are within Michigan, Ohio, and Indiana. Some of our customer needs are primary Primarily, our GIS clients are local and state governments, where we used a client-based approach, tailoring solutions to whatever that client might need. We always begin the project with the end in mind. Let's see, we also support, GIS at Fishbeck also supports a wide range of GIS needs throughout multiple divisions at Fishbeck. We support hydraulic modelers, environmental reporting, asset management, and field operations, just to name a few of them. At Fishbeck, the GIS team is located within the Geospatial Services Department, which is part of the infrastructure engineering. Our GIS team is composed of 5 GIS specialists accessing and editing the enterprise database on ROK. We currently have over 100 portal users accessing over 50 web applications, with a handful of users having capabilities to edit within those web applications. Fishbeck does not have any GIS staff within our IT. That's where ROK comes in. ROK helps us bridge the gap between GIS and IT.
Great. Thank you so much for a little overview around ROK and Fishbeck. Before we dive into our conversation today, I would love if we could just run a poll and understand from the attendees today, where are you in your cloud journey? Just to give us a little context on how you're coming to us in this conversation.
So on your cloud journey, I mean, this is a great topic. It's one that in the AEC industry, I think people are all over the place probably. Take a second here, think about where are you in this process of really depending on the cloud for your IT infrastructure. Are you already in there, really committed, or is this something that you've done your research, you're understanding some of the buzzwords, you're clear on a direction, but you haven't yet committed? Maybe you're still evaluating. You think it's about a year, 6 months to a year out before you would really have cloud first in your language, in your delivery. Maybe it's a while down the road. Maybe the projects that you're working on, your internal methods and culture, you know this is coming, but you're thinking years, a couple, maybe 3 years out, or maybe the type of work you do just doesn't justify it. There's a reason that you just do not see the cloud being integral to your means of collaborating and delivering projects. Interesting results. So close to half. Yeah, that actually, I'm thinking that's higher than I would have thought. So I'll have to take a look at who our attendees and registrants are later to maybe just do some cross analysis. But nice to see, because even just a year or so ago, the idea of AEC projects in the cloud, so many concerns around that. So nice to see some evolution here.
Yeah, that's actually pretty great. Happy to see that.
That's a nice segue, Mark, in that now we're seeing more in the cloud, and that's why we want to start here, pre-cloud, on-premise, and talk a little bit about the challenges that we're beginning to surface, and how long are those challenges bubbling up through your GIS division within Fishbeck. Karen.
So some of our pre-cloud challenges that we had at Fishbeck were we had many offices working from a central file server. Before we went to the cloud, we were using ArcMap with geodatabases just on a shared network drive. And so some of the challenges were, only one person could edit the geodatabase at a time. And as GIS was growing, we were always stepping on each other and having to allocate who's going into the geodatabase at what time and who's editing what. We needed a better way to manage Fishbeck staff and control who was editing. Previous to the cloud, we were using ArcReader to get data out to Fishbeck engineers. We had over 50 ArcReader users accessing GIS data. And part of the problem with that too is ArcReader required IT to install this on everyone's computer. So it really would bog them down. And also before implementation, some of our engineers had access to ArcMap, and they could freely open maps and also edit those geodatabases without consequences. So we wanted to really rein those people in. we used to get quite a few software requests for ArcMap from new employees that were coming in and felt like, oh, hey, I've taken one class in GIS. I feel like I'm an expert. Can I have ArcMap? We had really no way to control that. So now when we get those requests in, we just steer them towards our portal. Jason, did you have more to
Yes,
talk about?
well, I did a little bit actually. So the problem, we actually see this a lot, and this is pretty typical. AEC firms will have, many different offices all over, the country, or all over, a specific part of the country, northeast or southeast, and they've got GIS folks in multiple different offices, and it becomes the question of, all right, how do we get these GIS people that are in different offices, in different networks, how do we get them all together to try and, edit maps and collaborate on projects? And, Karen was lucky in that at least her offices were networked together, right? So they could actually all get to that same file server, but still then they'd have to deal with, okay, who's gonna edit this one file geodatabase? And then that gets exacerbated, right, by ArcGIS Online, which is great for getting some simple maps out there, and you can share that with folks and do some data collection. But then it becomes, well, okay, now I've got data sitting on ArcGIS Online. I've got one person editing this geodatabase in this office. Someone else may be trying to make a copy of that file geodatabase in another office, and people are making edits in desktop, people are making edits in ArcGIS Online, and it kind of gets really confusing on maybe who has the best, I guess the best copy of the data, right? Who's got the most updated one? Or do I have to all of a sudden merge these data edits together? So that's one of the biggest problems that we see specifically for AEC firms, right? And Karen was really no exception. Fishbeck was no exception. Does that sound about right?
Yep, sounds perfect.
Yeah.
Well,
So,
and
go ahead.
no, how long were you experiencing these pain points? Was there, what was that like? And obviously we all find workarounds and we accept it for a while, but I'm curious if you can talk about timing and how long this was a strain.
Yeah, I mean, we started looking into other solutions, around early 2018. There was two of us doing GIS at the time, and we knew we were just going to keep growing, and like, how are we going to manage this growth and better handle the data? So we just kind of started looking into solutions, and probably about 6 months after, we ran across ROK. A lot of that came, because Fishbeck IT, we didn't have really anybody in IT that knew really much about GIS. So, they encouraged us to look towards the cloud. So it was probably 2019, we started implementation and going forward from there. And it's just grown. I mean, as most people would know, I mean, there's so many applications for GIS that once you get into people's hands, they just want more and more and more.
Yeah, it's funny. I think we're already kind of skipping ahead on our slides, but
Yeah.
Sorry.
no, it's fine. It's funny though, because back in the day, for most of us kind of started on ArcGIS Desktop, or I don't want to date anybody, ArcInfo and things like that, but it was a very simple system, so to speak. We had our desktop application and we did some edits, and then people would come in and say, hey, can you print me a map, or can you make me a report, or dump an Excel spreadsheet? Now you think about it, we're all expected to be, when we move to this ArcGIS Enterprise type of system, we're expected to be, DBAs, or for SQL Server, we're supposed to know, everything about a SQL Server. We're supposed to be security specialists, right? We don't want to let our data leak. We don't want to open up all the ports to our system. We need to be security specialists. We got to be web server admins. We have to understand SSL certificates and reverse proxies. And now you have to manage this ArcGIS server and a portal. So there's so many, GIS and IT specific tasks that we just didn't have to do a handful of years ago. So now, as a GIS person, when we go to IT and say, hey, we need a web server, we need a reverse proxy, go into this, we need certificates, we need disk space here, we need these other servers, we need 5 servers, they look at you like, you guys make maps, you don't need all this stuff. But in truth, you've seen how much these systems have grown. So we really do need these systems, right? And IT doesn't necessarily understand GIS, and GIS folks don't necessarily understand IT. I think that's a pretty common theme that we run into. So that's one of the pieces where we kind of try to help bridge that gap, because ROK is really good in the GIS, the enterprise GIS space, but we also have the whole, IT team and the IT, specifically cloud experience, to sort of help bridge that gap. So we can explain it to IT, like, this is why they need these servers, and here's how we're going to protect it, and here's how we're going to manage all the backups and retention and all that, kind of give them that understanding that, yes, everything is going to be secure. But then we help the GIS folks by saying, okay, now you're going to be able to publish all these services. You're not going to have to worry about, figuring out why this map service is slow, or managing the permissions on your database. That's all the stuff that we can help take care of. Because I mean, that was probably a big problem, Karen. Like when you first started, it was like, we figured out that we do want to go to ArcGIS Enterprise, but it's like, how do we even do that? How do you have the knowledge to get that started?
Right, and the rest of all the other file servers that Fishbeck has were also cloud-based. So like we knew, and they encouraged us to go cloud-based. But like you said, it's kind of hard to take somebody who makes maps and expect them to know all the IT side of running those servers and such. So it was great having a ROK type service available that we could use for sure. Yeah, it looks like you moved on to. Go ahead.
You were mentioning that you were experiencing these pain points 2018. You didn't really have the expertise in your IT department. They encouraged you to go look. What were those considerations that you went through? And you're not in the cloud. You haven't really you're trying to figure out what you're looking to do. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, kind of what we've talked a little bit about earlier too, is needing a better way to distribute this GIS data, to the masses, have, everybody come to one central source for the GIS data, instead of data being, copied all over the network, or shape files. They still exist out there. And then without having to, install and purchase software, for everybody's computers, we just needed a way to get it out there in a more user-friendly way. And so, yeah, I mean, and like being a multidisciplined firm too, we were working on projects. We work on multiple projects for the same client. So instead of like copying that data across different areas on the network, again, we can just all go to the central source. Another problem we kind of had before the cloud too is we were using ArcGIS Online, and we still use it for some aspects of our business. But you'd publish a service to ArcGIS Online, but then you'd maybe make a change on the desktop version, and now you have to republish that service again, and it was just time consuming. I mean, we had, a large amount. I don't know how many services, Jason, if you got a chance to look to see how many services we actually have up there, but I'd guess we have, hundreds of services. So being able to manage that, we really wanted to find that dynamic solution between the database, and the services, so we weren't constantly having to figure out which data is the most recent. Is it the network data? Is it the data that's on ArcGIS Online? Like being able to manage that data flow. We wanted to just rein that in. I don't know,
Yeah.
Jason, if you have anything to add about that. Talk maybe a little bit about even needing like the resources required to run Pro and such on your computers, knowing that
Right.
ArcMap was going to be transitioning to Pro, that also kind of happened during all of this too. So.
Yeah. So when these guys were when Fishbeck was making this decision, obviously I think we've all heard the writing on the wall, like it or not, we are going to be all moving to Pro, right?
Mm.
It takes a little bit of getting used to, but I'm actually beginning to like it more and more every day, actually. But one of the things about Pro, well, this kind of puts, actually, let me go back. This puts kind of two things on the table. So now we've got people working in remote locations. So we have different offices, and even the people that are in those different offices may be working from home now, right? So we've got people working at home, we've got people working in multiple offices, and then add that in with the fact that we're transitioning to ArcGIS Pro, right? So those of us that have used Pro, we've used this quite a bit. We know that its hardware requirements are somewhat more substantial, right? You need a lot of horsepower, you need a lot of processor, you need a lot of, you actually need a GPU to actually make Pro work really well. So we couple that with people that are working all over the place, that becomes a little bit of a challenge, right? So once we've moved everything into the cloud, how are those folks going to actually connect to that data? Do we have to go buy everyone that's going to be using Pro, do we have to go get them new fancy laptops that are really high-end specs? Or can we look at it a different way? Can we actually transition those ArcGIS Pro workloads directly to the cloud? So, one of the solutions that we have for this is, and this is especially applicable for firms like Fishbeck and people like Karen, is that you can take a server that's sitting right next to your enterprise geodatabase, your ArcGIS server, and you can carve this server up into these individual, really powerful workspaces. So when somebody needs to launch ArcMap or launch ArcGIS Pro, doesn't matter where they are. They can be on a really kind of thin client. It could be like a Chromebook or a Mac or a really cheap Windows laptop. So what they're doing is they just open up a thin client, a VDIC. You've probably heard that before, a virtual desktop interface, and they open this up no matter where they are, and that launches in the cloud, right? Many people think of it sort of as like remote desktop. Everyone's probably used remote desktop before. This is a little bit similar. This is actually a lot similar to remote desktop, except that it's geared towards, real, true, local feeling performance, right? Because it's all that processing and all the GPU rendering, all of that stuff is now happening on the cloud. And only thing that the user needs is just getting those pixels streamed. So all the heavy lifting and all that work is done in the cloud. So that means no matter where the people are, no matter where the workers are that need to get to the enterprise geodatabase to do their work with Pro, they just jump on this virtual desktop interface and they're all collaborating in this one centralized workspace, without the need to go buy super high-end PCs for everybody. No need to have any kind of fancy VPNs to get in. It's just a really effective way to get that type of work done and be able to collaborate regardless of what location you're in. That's really worked out pretty well.
Yeah, and that worked out great for us at Fishbeck because we implemented enterprise, right before COVID hit. I mean, we didn't know clearly that COVID was going to hit, so it was like late 2019 we implemented, and we had everybody, the whole workforce went to working remotely. And what we found is people trying to go over the VPN to open those ARC reader files, it was slow. Even ArcMap was slow. They got to the point where like, we're not even going to open GIS, it's just too slow. So that was really when our portal, the web applications on our portal really exploded because they realized, hey, I don't have to be on Fishbeck's VPN. I just need a web browser and I can see all the data that I was able to see in ARC Reader. And then even more, I mean, ARC Reader had limitations that they weren't able to open an attribute table in ARC Reader. Well, they can, in a web app. So that was a huge benefit that I'm glad we implemented before that happened, because otherwise we would have been running around with our head, trying to find solutions for the other employees at the company, and even us working remotely, we were able to use the Citrix VDIs, and we stayed 100% productive through that time period.
And
Hey, a couple of
I'm not.
questions came in. Can I jump in here? I want to make sure that our audience who's attentive and asking us some good questions. First one here, hopefully is a quick answer. It might be one of those things that's hard to answer, impossible. What's the minimum requirements for Wi-Fi speed? So it's a broad question, probably with hopefully a short answer.
So Wi-Fi speed to say connect to one of these virtualized desktops?
Yeah, I think the question is kind of just in general, if you could just talk about maybe just performance in general, because
Yeah, I mean, very, very minimal. I mean, any type of anything beyond dial-up, right? Hopefully nobody here is on a dial-up modem anymore, but you know, if you can watch, if you can browse the web, then one of these, you can connect to one of these virtualized desktops, no problem, or stream, you know, those feature services from Portal.
yeah.
So very, very minimal.
Okay. So another question, Ken, I don't want to like too much on any one question. I know we have questions at the end as well, but these feel really timely to what you're talking about. Is there network latency using Pro in the cloud?
Yeah. So
Is that
this is the question facing the issue with, you know, processing on their SQL Server.
It's the second question actually that came in. But yeah, related to that same one as well. Yeah, you saw the question about SQL as well.
Yeah. Well, I'll talk about the SQL one because this is the one that I think
let's make sure people know what the question is, though. Hold on a second.
Okay, go for it.
What was it? It was facing the issue of processing SQL, EGDBs, anyone outside of our headquarters where the servers are located have quite a bit of lag time running long processing tools. The process for me takes 15 minutes, while the same process for our users from the smaller offices takes an hour plus.
Yeah, this is a huge.
Everyone's shaking their head. Good.
Yeah, this is a very, very common issue, and this is exactly what Karen was running into, not with the enterprise geodatabases, but with other geodatabases. But this happens all the time with firms that have multiple offices all over the place. But usually, you're only gonna have that one SQL server in one central location, right? Let's just call it the main office. That's where your SQL server is going to sit. And then you're local, you're in that one office, and you can get, you run these processes against your database, and it's super fast, right? Because that data is sitting literally right next to you, or right down the hall, or right in the other server room. So the problem becomes now we've got folks in Office B and Office C, and they're also now trying to connect to that enterprise geodatabase. So the issue is that they're probably having to jump on a VPN or go over, even worse, go over the actual internet to get to that SQL server from these different remote locations. And you've seen that it takes a much longer time. That's because the spatial data that's coming out of the enterprise geodatabase is, I don't know of a better term, but it's not just regular tabular data. It's not just rows and columns of ones and zeros and a couple of, attributes. This is like thick geometry data. So it's a lot of data getting pushed over what is essentially that long pipe, going to the other offices. So the latency that gets introduced, it's got to go all over the internet and bounce here, and it's got to go through all these different points, and that just makes that data, borderline unusable, right? It takes forever. So the solution to that is, instead of having your data in one location, right, and then having Office A go over the internet and try to hit that data, and Office B getting on a VPN and connecting to that data where it's just going to be really slow, is what you do is you put that data in that SQL server in one central location, in this case, the cloud, right? And then instead of everyone working remotely on, let's say, ArcGIS Pro on your local PC in Office A, and someone else in Office B has got ArcMap or Arc Pro, and trying to drag that data over the network, what you do is you pick up Arc Pro and you put that into the cloud too, right? So now you just log into your virtualized desktop, open Pro, and that data is literally sitting right next to it, right? So there's no latency, there's no slowdown, it's extremely fast. But the biggest benefit is that you're using all the server side resources, so you can put a GPU on that server and really accelerate how well Pro will work. And you get all those CPUs, you get the GPUs and extra RAM. So that is a huge issue. A lot of people will try to put an enterprise system up in the cloud with the enterprise SQL databases, and then try to connect to that enterprise geodatabase, offsite inside their office over a VPN, and it's just painfully slow. There's just too much latency. You have to move those workloads also into the cloud.
That makes sense. Thank you.
That was a little verbose, but hopefully you guys get the point.
I got it. I don't know if that helps. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So we should probably start talking about, you guys made the decision, right? And so we heard from IT, they wanted you to, they didn't want to get in the business of managing these, ArcGIS servers. So you guys figured out that you wanted to go to the cloud. You figured out that, yeah, enterprise is going to be the most logical product for us to do. But then, there's always those questions of, okay, now what? How much do we have to go? If we did want to do it on premise, how many servers do we have to buy? Or if we do it in the cloud, how big do these servers need to be to support all of the, all these new cool things that we want to do? There's a lot of decisions that need to be made. So that's where I guess you're, Karen, that's where you started doing your research. I know we've kind of talked about this a little bit already, but you started doing that research. You guys were able to implement it. And then
right. Before we get into how Karen did, I'm curious if, before we get into the business case and how you went about getting buy-in and moving, I would love if we could launch a poll to understand from the audience what are the biggest roadblocks or challenges that you guys think about? I know half of you are in the cloud already, but just to give us some understanding around what were you seeing as some of the considerations?
And I'll just read through these. What are the biggest roadblocks to your cloud deployment and migration? Security, certainly one with projects where your clients have concerns about their information getting into the hands of those that shouldn't have it. Integrations, one of the biggest topics these days that I'm involved with daily is how solutions are working together better than ever, and an expectation now that integrations occur and software doesn't just drop into an office and exist in an island, but it must integrate with existing solutions for a wide range of workflows. Perhaps the ROI, you haven't yet been proven to you that the cost is too high and the benefit, the return on that investment of all the benefits that you're hearing about are too long, too late, or may not apply. The process itself, introducing change is often a roadblock above and beyond anything. The challenge of having people change their existing processes, even when they know that it's for the best, it just is too hard to consider how to deploy such a large project in some cases, or even a small one, and just make changes in an organization that's very much set on its ways, or just an organization that is so heads down getting their work done and not having the resources for such a project, not having the expertise. These are big areas to overcome in getting projects from internal architectures to cloud deployment.
Each one of these plays a big role for each organization. Obviously, some more than others. That's why we're selecting one, but each one of them does play an important role.
Process change management, if you will, the migration deployment is something that's just overwhelming cost and resources, both tied for third, I guess there. Interesting, not a surprise.
That's what I was going to say. At Fishbeck, we were kind of all of the above. We didn't have resources in-house. We didn't really know exactly what we needed. I mean, I remember going to the user conference out in San Diego, just talking to the Esri people, and, a lot of it was over my head, and I'm like, oh, we need help. And then just all the other things that kind of go into it too. Like you talked about the security, and we knew at Fishbeck GIS was growing. We knew it was going to be utilized. Did we know it was going to grow so quickly? And again, that kind of goes back to COVID too. I think COVID really helped us launch this, up a level, and the buy-in was great. And yeah, so for all of the reasons above, that's kind of what drove us to make a change, and a change for the better.
Is there
Yeah.
anything else that went into your decision-making process? I know we'll quickly get into the deployment process and how all that came out to play. But just, is there anything else that you want to share around the what went into really making that choice?
Yeah, I mean, we looked at options, mostly, we had conversations with Esri, like what would we need? And we're also busy doing our other work also, and just going with ROK was just so much simpler. But we made our spreadsheet of all of our options and did our research, and considered costs, like if we had to buy the hardware ourselves, would we hire somebody who has more expertise in this? Would you send a current employee to training? And I feel like with ROK, you get a whole group of people that can help you, because we can't all be specialists to everything. But there's always somebody to get a hold of, or somebody to get a hold of and can help you with your situation.
It sounds like an ad for ROK, but it's really not.
Yeah,
I
it's
mean,
not. Sorry.
no, but it is important though to have the right kind of skill sets. It is overwhelming when you go to, you may go to Esri and you've determined you do need enterprise, but it's like, okay, now what? How do I deploy this? Or do I get the servers, do I buy all these servers in-house, or do I look at something in the cloud? But, the only thing I know about the cloud is that's where my, email lives, right? There's a lot of choices to be made. There's a lot of research, and you also have to have as we were saying, you got to have the right talent in-house that you've got to maybe send off to train or hire somebody new. But there's a lot of different considerations you have to take when thinking about making one of these moves.
Yeah, in long term too. I mean, just because you got deployed or migrated over, you say you're done, but it's continuous. It's continuous, like maintaining going forward too. So what does that look like to you? Is there somebody in-house? It's more than just the initial implementation.
That's very true. And actually, I'm gonna give I'm getting a little ahead of myself, but this is such a good story I have to share. So, one of the things we do at ROK is, we get with our clients and we have these little discussions, and we, check out their servers and making sure that they're sized correctly. So I guess it was a couple of months ago, Karen, I don't know exactly when it was, but it was, within about 6 months or so, we got on Karen's ArcGIS Enterprise, the ArcGIS server portion, and the RAM was like, it was way up there. And we, when we're starting out, we start them off, everybody out on, pretty, smallish machine, 4 CPUs, 16 gig of RAM, if it's a brand new deployment, right? Well, it was pretty clear that, Karen was like going gung ho and just publishing service. I mean, really going to town. And we jumped on there. We always monitor this stuff really closely. So, one day the feed came in and said, hey, it's kind of a high RAM usage. Let's go, we should probably go take a look. So we jumped on there, and Karen her and her team had just gone to town. It was like really cool to see, but there were so many map services that had been published because they were, it was really picking up, and we were looking at it. And this was a great kind of a great kind of junction point where it's like, okay, we could say, Karen, you need to go, you've really reached the limit of what this hardware is really going to be able to do for you. Or we could think about alternative ways to try to squeeze more performance out of this one existing server. And after looking at these different services and talking to them about their use cases, what was going on was it was pretty clear that they had the need to publish a lot of different map services. Like there was just no way around that. But the issue was that none of those services were super duper, like I call them the heavy hitters. Like none of them were getting hit all day long. So what we decided was we looked at it and said, we can really take advantage. And I should also mention, had previously just upgraded them to 10.9.1, right? So we could take advantage of the new shared instance model that you can get with Pro, publishing your services with Pro and using Enterprise 10.9.1 to really reduce the RAM footprint on those servers. So we can use that shared process where you essentially can pump several map services into one ARC-SOC process, or you can of course use that dedicated instance model where you get one map service equals one instance. So looking at it, the way Karen had done it, she published all their services with the dedicated instance model, and the RAM was already almost maxed out. So we went in and we kind of discussed this, right? And we figured that we can just republish everything with Pro and put this on the shared instance model. And so I jumped on the other day and I took a look and I was just glowing with pride. I know this is cheesy, but they had gone in and republished everything with Pro. There must be, I don't know, there's got to be 100+ services running now, but every single one of them, except for the couple that were the heavy hitters, had been published using the shared instance model. So we essentially were able to extend the life of this server by, they're going to get another couple of years with this size machine. We don't have to go upgrade and get them the bigger size machine, which of course costs more money every month. So it's those sort of things that I don't know, it makes me happy, like when we can collaborate and figure good solutions out, save a couple of bucks, and really take advantage of the technology. So I was just super excited to see that they were able to publish everything. They're all using shared instances, and the RAM usage has just easily cut in half, but even with more services now published. It was just a really cool thing.
Yeah, and that's another thing we really like too, is the scalability that you guys offer. If we get a project that has a higher need, we could just reach out to you and you give us what we need, and say that project lasts a couple years, we can always scale it back down when that project is over. Even just this morning we were talking about images and such, and doing more with drone data, and your ability to help us with the back end of all that too.
Yeah, well, that's another kind of cloud first mentality kind of option is you can take all of those raw rasters. I mean, lots of people, AEC firms specifically, are taking in lots of drone imagery, and those are big files, right? So where do we store them? Do we ask IT to buy a $100,000 big 20 multi-terabyte SAN, or wouldn't it be great if we could just put that raw imagery in a cheap cloud storage bucket for basically pennies versus what you would normally have to pay for in-house architecture or in-house SAN disks, and you still have the ability to serve those those raw images directly from those really inexpensive cloud buckets. So that worked out really well.
Yeah, so all
I
these
love
things
how you guys are talking about. I love how you guys are talking about things that are happening now that you're in the cloud, and it's really great. I do want to spend a quick minute to talk a little bit about the deployment process, like what happened in the beginning. If we can talk a little bit about just that process for those who are joining us today that are maybe thinking about moving and aren't yet in the cloud. Could you hit some of those highlights? I know we're getting towards the end of time, and want to get to some more of those benefits that you guys have just been talking about. But Karen, would you mind just sharing a little bit about highlights of that process?
Yeah, I mean, we moved at a crawl, walk, run type methodology. We just started out with we sat down as a team and decided which databases would be ideal to go up in the cloud, and we just started with like one or two, and then over time we learned in-house how to publish those publish databases and such ourselves, and just kind of made it grow. And with COVID, the walk maybe was a short process, and we were more crawl run, just trying to get up so much more to support the in-house staff and such. But I think the deployment, I mean, from our side, it was very simple. I mean, we were a brand new deployment, and so I believe from ROK's end, it was really straightforward. I think, well, now we're up to like 30 databases, so we are growing for sure. but it was simple. It was easy, really. I mean, you kind of just walk in one day and your server's up and running, and even doing like upgrades, changing from, 10.9 or whatever to 10.1, they just, plan, hey, we'll do it over the weekend, and then you come in on Monday and run through your tests, and it's all done for you. So pretty straightforward from our side of things.
Yeah, so this was a pretty, Fishbeck was a pretty easy one, so to speak, because they didn't have an existing enterprise in the cloud. So a lot of our customers already have an existing on-premise enterprise deployment, and that's a little bit of a different case. But for Karen at Fishbeck, they were brand new. They had all the data, right? So they just basically got all their data together. This is the data that we need to have in this new cloud environment. Took that data, put it up there, loaded it into SQL Server, and that's really it. That, and we took all of their map documents, your pro projects, your MXDs, your geocoders, all the things that come along with your ArcGIS projects, put that up there in the cloud with their Citrix virtualized workstations, and they just went right to town, started publishing right away. I mean, it was a really quick process for those guys.
So Karen, what do things look like now for you?
Well, we're continuing to evolve for sure. We've expanded, GIS has been adopted by many different divisions within our company. We've really reached out more. We recently implemented, it's called ArcGIS Connector for ArcGIS. It's a solution through Autodesk. We have a lot of AutoCAD users where the AutoCAD users are now able to tap into our portal and pull services right into AutoCAD for their area of interest, which means no more exporting of shapefiles for us. So that's been great. And we're just going to continue, to create more collaborations, between participating organizations. And I want to get more into the monitoring of our server, like figuring out, like, do we have orphan services, what's getting hit the most, just trying to make that server run and continue, with technology going forward. And then to continue to support our portal users for sure, grow that portal, create more web maps, just things like that, continued growth.
That's great. Jason, is there anything you want to add to that?
No, I think Fishbeck is killing it. I mean, again, I've told you that story. I was just so proud, and we're able to really extend the life of, what they're doing. But just really impressive to see, an organization start from just basically handing us some data, to put into SQL Server, and then they had their map files. And, this, in a really short amount of time, you go look at their portal, and they just got web apps doing all sorts of crazy cool stuff. It's one of those really big success stories that it's so nice to see. I mean, there's a lot of success stories out there, but I don't know, Fishbeck was very special, I guess, because they just really took the bull by the horns and just did it. It's just so impressive to see all the stuff that they've been able to accomplish in really a short amount of time.
Yeah,
really good stuff.
Just kind of embraced it and ran with it. No looking back for sure.
Well, then I know we have a lot of really great questions that we want to get to. So one final thought around any key advice that you would give after going through this for those who might be considering.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of options available to you out there. Do your homework, talk to your peers, talk to people, that are knowledgeable about cloud migration and implementation. Go to user conference, talk to people at Esri, talk to people at booths. Really just do your homework and take the time up front to make the correct, make a decision and go with it,
Yeah, definitely do your research. I don't want to give you a cautionary tale, but just make sure you know what you're doing. But the most important thing really is to ask around, talk to other people that are in the industry, and see what they suggest and see how they've done it. Again, I'm not plugging anything, so just the big thing would be to ask around, ask folks at Esri, ask your peers in other organizations, and see how they did it. Basically learn from other people's experience would be my suggestion.
That's great. Well, Karen and Jason, I'm going to hand you over to Mark, who's been fielding some questions, and see what we can sneak in here at the end.
We got some folks who have asked some good questions. And how long would it take to upload the data for people with slow internet?
The goal is to get your entire organization, your entire GIS in the cloud, right? So all of your data gets edited in the cloud, it gets created in the cloud. So there might be times where you're uploading, let's say, aerials or something, but there's mechanisms in which to batch upload those things in the background, so you really don't ever have to deal with it.
Yeah, and I'll maybe just jump to the most recent question that came in, that when you talk about everything being in the cloud, can you elaborate more on security? And it just immediately comes to mind, how can a cloud environment be as secure or more secure even than on-prem servers? And I know there's a lot of answers behind that as well, but just to maybe spend a few more minutes here on security being one of those issues that is a hurdle or a roadblock.
Yeah, I think what we hear about nowadays is everybody's, there's a security breach here, and that kind of filters down to thinking that the cloud is insecure, and it's not. I would take the opposite look at that and say a cloud environment is more secure than an on-premise environment. For example, if I'm in the cloud, I can't just walk down and drop a thumb drive into the back of the server and deploy a Trojan or something, right? In the cloud, like anything, if you're on-premise or if you're in the cloud, you gotta have the right team managing it, right? You have to make sure that the security is set up properly. You can't just spin up a server, right? Like the cloud companies have made it extremely easy to just go turn on a server and you're off to the races. But are all the ports locked in? Locked down? Are your disks encrypted? Are they in transit? As the data is moving, is that data encrypted? When the disks are being backed up, are those disks encrypted? There's tons and tons of these tools that are available to you in the cloud, but you have to know to take advantage of them. It really is my contention that a cloud-based system with all the logging and all those tools that are available to you are more secure than you can get with an on-premise solution.
Another question kind of about quantity and size of the hardware. How do you determine the number of services that you can put in the shared pool? And then right behind that, 4 cores, 16 gigabytes, right? So
that is the size of Karen's server right now. But if we had continued down that line, I mean, literally hundreds of services were up there, not hundreds, but well over 100. And if we had gone down that road of using dedicated instances, easily would have had to double the size of that machine to a bigger instance size. How many map services can we push onto a shared instance? It all depends. It really depends on how much they're getting hit. What the processor usage looks like. There's lots of things that go into it, but there's fairly straightforward calculations that you can make. And honestly, we won't go into this level of depth on this webinar because I could talk for an hour about it. But so hit me up after this. I'll totally get down and dirty with you if you want to discuss.
Is there a short answer to how do you utilize cloud-based maps, apps, tables with non-cloud-based, with on-prem? Is there a short answer to that?
Short answer is there has to be some planning on how those integration points work, right? So ArcGIS Enterprise, ArcGIS Server, Portal, those are really good at exposing their services via REST APIs. But when you're talking about maybe exchanging data between a SQL server in the cloud and one that's sitting on premise, there's a ton of different options. You can put in really inexpensive site-to-site or client VPNs to let those things communicate together. You can do scheduled jobs where SQL Server on premise dumps out a data file, and then SQL Server 2 in the cloud snatches it and imports it. All that stuff is automated nowadays, so it's pretty straightforward stuff.
And I think maybe the shortest answer is what you put up on the screen, Jennifer, is to reach out to ROK. You guys know your stuff here clearly. A few ways of contacting you guys for an assessment, to follow up on a question that you asked that we just didn't get to, or maybe something that kind of formulated afterwards and was brewing in your head and now you're ready to put your fingers on the keyboard and send off a question. Please do reach out to our friends at ROK.
And Karen too.
Yeah.
And Karen as well, yeah. Do we have Karen's contact info? That we did. Thank you. I didn't notice that. Yes, direct from the source. Someone
When
who's
to get some inspiration, she's the one to get it from. I'll tell you.
Thanks,
I bounced right over that. Didn't notice Karen's contact info right in the middle there. So get ready, Karen. If you want to jump ahead to the next couple of slides, we're just going to fly through this in the last minute. Thank you for connecting today. You're part of the Esri community. Hopefully that means that you're a user of our software. You have access to our user community. Please take a minute and see the content we have up there, recorded webinars. Please connect with us through LinkedIn and Twitter, where we're posting stories, we're announcing these kinds of activities and events and webinars, we're promoting our partners like ROK. So either of those sources. One more, we send out a newsletter so that you know what's going on ahead of time and get links to recorded content like this and articles that we write and events that we'll be at, customers that we highlight. So please sign up for our newsletter. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
With that, thank you, Jason, Karen, Jennifer. Thank you, Laurence and Lauren behind the screen. And thank you, ROK Technologies, for all this great information and support of our customers. Take care.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody. See ya.